Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. This is a DFS strategy video for the 2021 Shriners Hospitals for Children Open. Now, what do I cover in these videos, or in this video? Well, I primarily cover the bucket system almost exclusively. I also talk about time pairings and wrap it all up with my favorite plays considering everything that I've talked about this week. So course fit, stat fit, and now bucket system. So without further ado, let's go ahead, get into the spreadsheet and talk about the bucket system. But before I actually do that, I do want to apologize for not getting this video out earlier. I have a golf event on Friday that I needed to practice for. So I spent a little time doing that after my primary job. And then when I came home from golf, the vice president debate was on. So my girlfriend and I wanted to watch that, ended up watching that, and now here I am. So I'm trying to get this out as quick as I possibly can. But I also have, I had a couple viewers tell me, hey, love your stuff, but I have no idea what the bucket system is. So in the past, I used to explain in full detail what the bucket system was. Every lineup construction video I had. What ended up happening was those videos would be over an hour long. And in order to cut down on time, I just took out the explanation completely. Primarily, I intended on creating a bucket system video. I just haven't gotten around to it. So I need to make a promise with you guys. I'm going to create a bucket system video, and then I will no longer have to talk about, the bucket system at all. Not so much at all, but I won't have to explain it as much as I do in my videos. So I will do a full explanation in this video. If you want to skip past that, you will see timestamps in the description. Or if you hover the mouse over the screen, or I guess if you're on mobile, I think you can with your thumb, I have chapter mode enabled. So you can see all the different segments down here. And those are just basically all the timestamps that I have in the description. It's pretty nice. So anyways, let's go ahead and explain what the bucket system is. First and foremost, when we look at my 2021 DK page, you see LYB, LWB. We see numbers here and numbers here. Now, what those numbers, represent. If you haven't figured it out, I shouldn't say figure it out. I also have these color coded based off of their numbers as well. And the reason being is it's kind of a tracking device of what golfers' finishing positions were the year before as well as the week before. Because I like to think of golf in the most recent form of course history and recent form. That's essentially how I look at this. I want to look at golfers who finished inside the top 5 of whatever year I'm looking at. What were their finishing positions the year before? What were their finishing positions the week before? That's essentially what the bucket system is. I have 2 tables that represent that information. There's a top 5 table and a top 10 table. The top 10 table is the table that I rank all the golfers every single year, every single week. That's where these numbers come from. So very quickly, we can see Bryson is a last year 3. He finished 4th last year. He's also a last week 1, which means he did not play last year. And if we come back to the bucket system, you can see the did not play from the last week bucket is ranked 1. So there he falls under this bucket. And the third ranked bucket are golfers who finish 1 to 20. Therefore, he is a 3-1. And you can see what that is here. I color code it based off the last year bucket because believe it or not, the last year bucket is more important than the last week bucket. We see we see more consistent results with the last year bucket than the last week bucket. Which there's always that ongoing debate. Course history versus recent form. Well, we can include both, right? We can include recent form of course history and recent form of recent form. So all of these numbers in these rows, I actually should explain what the rows are. The rows are ranges. First a 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60, 80, so on and so forth, and then did not play. I should also explain what the 80 plus is. And I'll do that right now. Why do I have 6 ranges? You know, we see 6 ranges here. We have 6 ranks, you know, numbers that represent ranks here. Why 6? Well, 6 is a pretty common number in DFS golf. You have 6 positions per lineup. I know there are different platforms out there that do different numbers, but at least for the main one, which is DraftKings only has 6. FanDuel once had 8, but they changed it back to 6, pretty much to conform to DraftKings, because it's simpler when everything is kind of the same. So that's why, that's one reason why. The other reason why I have 6 is because you rarely ever find golfers, or I should say, you rarely ever find more than 80 golfers to make the cut in any tournament. We have it's the cut nowadays is top 65 in ties. Last year, or prior to last year, it was top 70 in ties. And what would end up happening sometimes, you would have over 78 golfers make the cut. And if that was the case, they would have a secondary cut on Saturdays. That secondary cut would happen, that would be top 60 in ties. So just a quick recap, just going back in time a little bit. It used to be top 70 in ties on a Friday. If more than 78 golfers made the cut after Friday's cuts, then there would be a secondary cut on Saturday, and then it would only be top 60. Now, again, rarely did you ever see 80 or more golfers make that first cut. But even if they did, most of them would be done after Saturday's round, unless they moved up the leaderboard considerably. So they wouldn't get Sunday's round of scoring DraftKings points. I always put those golfers in 75th place. I don't consider them 80th or above. I just put them in 75th place. And it's okay. I mean, there have been tournaments. I think there was one, I can't remember what it was, but I think there were 86 golfers to make the cut. The first cut. And I believe, man, I can't remember what it is now. There was a secondary cut, but there were like 78 golfers to make that secondary cut. And what my data had were golfers who were in 78th place, 77th, 76th, and then a couple like 8 or 9 in 75th place. In my opinion, that doesn't matter. I mean, sure, for DraftKings points, it does, but you're not scoring that many more DraftKings points making the cut, you know, after the secondary cut, but still finishing dead last. Either way, they still belong in this range because it's one of the worst ranges to be in. Every single week that I do this 60 to 80 range from the year before rarely ever finishes inside the top 10. Sure, maybe the top 20, but never inside the top 10. So it didn't matter to me. That's kind of long-winded. I didn't need to go that far into it, but just to let you guys know, that's why I have these ranges, why there are only 6 ranges, and what those numbers signify. So 80 plus are missed cuts, withdraws, and DQs. So they could only play 1 round. They could play 0 rounds. You know, they might have played 2 holes. I'm putting them in this range. And that's primarily because your tournament, no matter what, is cut short, either from a missed cut or you just withdrew or DQ'd. And it's all of this does for me is just track motivation. I want to track, you know, how likely is a golfer who finishes top 20 the year before going to finish top 20 for this year? And if I go into, say, the 2020 recent form tab, actually, let's go ahead and go into the notes. Again, there were 2 golfers we can see inside the top 5 of 2020 who had a finishing position of 1st to 20 the year before. Obviously, we go to 2020, we see Cantlay and DeChambeau both finishing, you know, top 20 the year before. Now they finished 1st and 2nd the year before, but they still are in that top 20 finish. Well, what about the rest of the golfers in that range? There's a considerable amount that actually finished top 20 once again. So, you know, we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 golfers who finished top 20. Now we have 3, 6, 7 golfers who missed the cut. So it's not to say that this is going to be a you know, a fail-safe bucket to go by, but you only have a limited amount of golfers. You know, there were 18 golfers who finished top 20 the year before, and what was it, seven of them, so nearly half, you know, finished inside the top 20 again. That's a good conversion number. Now we can come down here and we're going to see many more golfers who missed the cut. That ends up being 27 golfers who missed the cut, and out of those 27 we had 4 golfers including the winner. Now that conversion isn't as good, and even worse I would say is probably last year not playing the year before. So there's 46, and actually in all honesty that isn't a terrible number whatsoever, because you have 2 right here, 2 plus these guys here, 11, 13 out of 46. So I guess the conversion's pretty close, but either way, you don't see one range like much more populated than another, and that's where the bucket system kind of comes into play. So if you have someone who's really expensive, who isn't in a good bucket, you wouldn't want to play them. So if I were to sort by the range, I mean, Brooks Koepka I think was a 1-1 last year. If we go by rank, you know, salary, yeah, he would have been a 1-1, which typically is your best bucket. But it's also to show you, you know, although he might be the top guy at this bucket, he might not be the best play, again, for that bucket. I can go something like this and just show you, you know, okay, we had 3 golfers who still finished inside the top 20, but obviously the 1-1s didn't show up as good. And a lot of it's just to look at which golfers are in those buckets. Do they match up? You know, we can look at several different things. We can look at bent grass stats. We can look at recent form average. We can look at course history. We can even look at all the strokes gained metrics to try to determine which golfer is the best to play. So there are layers to the whole bucket system and what it means and what it entails. So either way, again, all the numbers that you see in here are basically finishing positions that I captured for each year of each bucket. Again, they're ranked over here by the sum, obviously, how often it's happened. And then I also have a percentage over here to show you guys, you know, of top 5 finishes each year, how many golfers over the last 6 years have finished inside, you know, the top 5 for that range. So it gives you a little bit of confidence. That's how I look at it. And it should also kind of sway you off of certain golfers as well. If there's a high price guy within these buckets here. So if there was ever a 4-1, you know, or a last year 4, you wouldn't want that. Now again, the numbers aren't based off the top 5, they're based off the top 10. I hope I haven't lost you guys yet. So these numbers here are going to be represented on the DK page, and that's what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to tell you guys right now, your top 2 buckets are last year 2 and last year 1. And they happen, you know, almost double. These 2 by themselves, I don't know why I can't see what my number is down here. Interesting. It totally disappeared on me. Wow. Okay. Google is doing something extremely odd. Google Sheets, that is. There we go. I got it back. I don't know what happened, but it went away. So anyways, these 2 numbers here account for 68.75% of all buckets finishing inside the top 10. So if we're going to target golfers, we're going to want a few more 2s and 1s. Last year 2s, last year 1s. We can also come down to the last week bucket, which you can see right here. My head's in the way. You're going to see what those numbers represent over here. Now, your last year 1 and last year 2 for last week represent 53.85%. Let's see. Oh, cool. Oh, I must have clicked the side panel for some reason. Whatever. We're going to keep it as is. Anyways, so that's how the bucket system looks like. And that's probably the best explanation that I could give without really writing it down or detailing it. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense for you guys. I also combine these buckets every single year, as you can see here. So last year, I mean, if I were to pull up 2020, the 2020 DK page, we're going to see 2 3s. I know the color coding is a little different. I color code based off the last year bucket. So whatever this number is determines the color of the entire bucket combination and name. So when we look, if you were to look at all these numbers, they're going to match up with what you see right here. Maybe in different orders, but you can see Joel Damon, Brian Gay, a 6 and a 5. You can see what they are right there. So it actually is in order. And then you also see the last week bucket as well. Now, these bucket combinations, what I end up doing is throwing them down here and counting how many times they've happened. So right next to it is just the overall count of each of these buckets. So there were 9 1-1s over the last 6 years. Next to it, right next to the name of the bucket combination, would be how many years of the last 6 years has it happened. So a 1-1 has happened 4 out of 6 years. Surprisingly, a last year 1, last week 2 finished 9 times, or it happened 9 times over the last 6 years, but it's happened every single year. So we might want to be looking at our 1-2s, and I have a surprise for you. Your first 1-2 you see on the screen is Sergio Garcia. Now, does he finish inside the top 20? I don't know. I kind of like it, especially for his price tag. He's been striking the hell out of the golf ball recently, so I don't see Sergio being a bad play. But then you can also see some of the worst buckets. You know, last year 6, any of those combinations we don't see inside the top 10. Yeah, sure. Last year 6, last week 3. So if we look at all the 6 3s around, you can see one finished 10th place here and one finished 9th place there. So if we see any top priced last year 6s, is a 10th place finish good for someone like Scottie Scheffler? Probably not. Now, also, I'm not going to say that this is set in stone. There are mold breakers. So depending on which golfers are in those 6 3s, that's going to determine, you know, whether or not those golfers actually do better or not. And when I do create that bucket system video for you guys, it's going to show you how some of these golfers actually fall into their bucket. So they play worse, even if they are a top guy. But I'll also show you how it also breaks the mold. I think there was a John Rahm finish not too long ago where he was a 6-3. He finished like 2nd or 3rd. So, and obviously that's John Rahm. You can make the case for Scottie Scheffler. I wouldn't so much say you can make the case for Jason Kokrak. I don't think he's a good enough golfer to fall out of that 6-1 bucket, in all honesty. And if he finishes 20th, guess what? He still doesn't make top 10. I'm trying to find golfers inside the top 10. That's where you find the optimal lineup. The closer you can get to those golfers, the better. So that is primarily what it is. And again, even if you see a 5-1, it is cause for concern. Now it's obviously Colin Morikawa. Are you concerned about that? So if we went with our top 6s, you know, the range itself of golfers in here, because that's the other piece of it, is when we look at buckets, we got to look at the golfers inside each of those buckets. So the last year 6 bucket only consists of 11 golfers. The best golfer obviously is Scottie Scheffler. So we would want to consider that when looking at all the buckets. But I'm going to go back to the bucket system page, the notes page here. And again, I capture every single combination. I then calculate all of those out into percentages down here. So when we look at each one of these, now you remember 1-2 has happened every year over the last 6 years. Is that true? Are my numbers off? Oh, we're looking at these are top 5 finishes. This would be top 10 finishes. So I do it by top 5 and I do it by top 10. So you can see 37.84% are either last year 1 or last year 2. I shouldn't even say it that way. Your top 4 buckets, I'm going to put it that way, 45.95%. Last year 2, last week 3, last year 2, last week 2. So a 2-2, a 2-3, or a 1-2, 1-1. That's primarily how I say this. That's a significant amount. That's a significant number. Now, sure, we see some 1-5s and 1-6s happen a couple times. But if you want a well-rounded number, look up here. We see a lot of last week 1s and 2s here. Not so much any, last week 3 until obviously we get here. But then now we creep in a last year 3. And again, these are top 10 finishes. Where's that last year 3, last year 1? 8.11%. Goes up just slightly, 8.75%. So I guess as I'm thinking about this, I'm probably really buzzing over your head right now. And a lot of you guys might be lost. Put it this way. The numbers you see at the top here are your best bucket combinations. So when we go through the spreadsheet, a 1-1 is going to be a golfer. It's going to be a bucket you want to play at least in 11.25% of your lineups. You might think to yourself, well, why 11.25? It's just a safe number. But if you think it's going to happen, and if you play, say 10 lineups, play it in 100%. Because this number is obviously fairly high. So is this number. I mean, I think any of these numbers up here, you could choose. So that's basically it. 20 minutes to discuss the bucket system. And that essentially is how it used to always be, would be 20 minutes to discuss the buckets. So just letting you guys know, that's how the bucket system works. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I shouldn't even say enjoy it. Hopefully you enjoyed the explanation. So let's go ahead and get into each one of those buckets. What I ended up doing over here in the sweet spot number. So I guess I'll explain what the sweet spot number is that you see on the screen. It is basically just a number that signifies, first of all, I actually have to go backwards. How about this? No. I do want to explain what those numbers are based off of, and I can only do that by coming back down here and showing you one other piece of information. So I know if you're following along the entire way, I'm jumping all over the place, but in the time description, it's going to happen now. So this would be basically a price breakdown of only the last 2 years, because I only have DraftKings data for the last 2 years. And what this is capturing are the salaries for each of the finishing positions for each of the last 2 years. So 2020 and 2019. And what I do then is do a count over here, showing you, what salary was more important than another. We're never really going to see the same salary pop up. It's not like the salary number itself is a player and is determined. It's not going to determine someone's success, but you can see how many top priced guys finish inside the top 5. You can see a considerable amount. We do have some 6K guys here, a couple 7Ks, a few 9s, but for the most part, we see, 10 and above. I think it's got to be the right number. Yeah, okay. And you obviously can double check me right here. You see a lot of 10K and above, 9K, couple 6K, couple 7, and 1 8. So definitely high price guys kind of excel here. But then I also go the top 10. So that includes, the other numbers that were underneath that. And sometimes we will find the same golfer in these ranges. Sometimes. Instead of, kind of counting all of these and seeing how many of them are within a range, I do that over here. So we go 10K and above. We have 5 golfers, and this is only the last 2 years. So it's not like a very good sample size. but we have 5 golfers who finished top 10 who had a salary of 10K and above. And it basically goes 10 and above, 9 to 10, 8 to 9, 7 to 8, and below 7. And again, this is only for top 10. You can see what the average salary is. DraftKings only allows you 8,300. 8,333 is what it ends up being. That is the average salary per player you can spend on DraftKings. When this number here is higher than the DraftKings number, it tells you how many more, I shouldn't say how many more. It just tells you that there are expensive golfers inside the top 10 for each year. And I think you need to put it into consideration. I think you need to roster a few high-priced guys. And I won't even say a few. I think you need to anchor someone 10K and above to go along with a couple other golfers. Now, you're not going to be able to follow this completely because you're not going to have you're not going to have enough roster money to do so. So you will have to make substitutions. And I mean, that's why I do like looking at the ranges. That's why I also like looking at the counts here. We did have a 6.6 and a 6.5, a 6.3 inside the top 5. So I think we are okay playing a 6K golfer. And then when we look at the ranges here, it kind of gives us a little bit more confidence in either rostering a high price guy or rostering a low price guy or anyone in between, essentially. And then I also have the winner salary down here. This is only really relevant when it comes to multiple years of data that I have. I don't. So that's one thing. Now, coming back to the 2021 DK page, this number here, it represents the price. So the range of golfers. So it's these 3 numbers, why they're so high is because it's only counting these 3 golfers in that range. And it's based off of this number here, 19.23% of how many lineups I'm going to create. So therefore, in a way, it's supposed to be my ownership. It's supposed to reflect ownership. But I did a couple weird number things in here. Primarily because if I actually multiplied it by 10. So really this would say 18, 20, 17. But then when we come down here, this number would be 5 or 6 depending on where I rounded it. And then obviously coming down here, a lot of these numbers would be 0. And I didn't want to see that. I wanted to see some of these numbers be, closer to 5, 6, 7. I wanted some of these 6K golfers to pop. So that's where that number comes from. It's essentially looking at these 3 golfers, determining based off their buckets, determining based off of their scoring average. What is the last piece I look at? I guess that would be it. So it's really just adding those 3 numbers up. I usually have a multiplier just to really, try to find the right player for me. But I didn't do it for this one. I just wanted the numbers to be close. And I thought multiplying by 10 would show enough disparaging, numbers to pick one guy over another. So that's where the numbers over here come from. That's where the sweet spot number is derived from. Not sure how I'm going to put that in the timestamps, but I'll figure out a way. Therefore, for me, when I look to select players, I'm also looking at buckets. I'm looking at buckets. I'm looking at price. But I suppose let's go ahead and look at our last year 1 bucket. And in all honesty, let me do this because I don't so much care to go by the combination. I want to see the salary first. So, I mean, out of our 9K golfers, Harris English and Ricky Fowler would be my favorite last year 1 plays based off of the numbers that I see and kind of based off of how I feel about those players. But any of these guys could be replaced. And in all honesty, if you're creating a lineup, so if I go from like Harris English, let me throw down Harris English here. So if I put Harris English there, I would want my pivot to be like Jason Day. Or if I do like Ricky Fowler, go Ricky Fowler. So you can see it opens up a little bit of a price, opening. But let's actually create like a dummy lineup like really quick. So I'm going to actually throw Harris English in there. I'm not going to, let me put like one of the other high price guys here. So let's go ahead with I'm going to go Webb. So we can go web. So that leaves us with 7,300. Go figure. I just want to go by salary. Let's grab one 6K guy. Who is my favorite guy down here? Actually, I'm going to go with Patrick Rogers. So I'll throw him over here. This is usually where my 6K golfers go. Now let's find some other golfers that we like. Maybe we go Stuart Sink. Throw him here. He's a 1-2. So let's get some other numbers. Denny McCarthy being a 3-2. I like it. And that leaves us with $7,600. Let's go with something like let's go with Harold Varner. So we can create something like this. And basically what I'm going to show you is probably something you've already seen before. And this is kind of the strategy that I would implement. But what we could do is if we did like Harris English, but we weren't convinced that he was the guy. Well, we could do something like this. Real simple. And that way then our salary over here doesn't change much. Especially if we were on a bunch of these guys that we like or whatever, you could certainly do something like that. Now you could do the entire like cascading method this way, and that's actually what I'm going to show you in my strategy going, later on. But that's how I would look at each of these buckets. So the number over here is going to signify who my favorite play is in a way. So I guess if I were to go somewhat like this, but it also has to go by price range as well. So if we see a guy up here that is a good price range, just star him. What I would end up doing is creating another column over here and putting a star next to him. So let me just do that. And I mean, I'm just going to do this for the video. I don't typically do this. So now we're going to include this column over here. But we could put a star next to certain golfers that we like. Obviously, I mean, like Harris English, I don't know if he has kind of a hangover after the US Open, but for stat wise, for scoring average wise, for his bucket, he is one of the top plays that I like. But we could also come down here and see like a Cameron Davis. That's not a terrible price, for a 1-2. Again, look at name recognition. Matt Kuchar at 7,600. We could certainly star him as someone who is, 76. And by the way, these again are kind of rankings for my last year one buckets when you look at all the golfers over here. Our top 6K golfer, I think, is Tyler Duncan, just by one though. I mean, there's a slew of them here at five or six, but Duncan would be the top guy. And that's how I would look at that. And I already know I'm looking at what I'd say is, in my mind, I don't have something I can show you yet. But if all of these golfers, if I could show you their shot shape, that would indicate, the course fit part of it. When it comes to the stat fit part, we're looking at the numbers right here, because we can see we saw that in the stat fit video. So these numbers would be represented right here. But if I were to go with this, I guess that's the best way to do it too, is looking at stat fit and trying to find our best golfers. So 6,300, Will Gordon. He's a 1-6, not terrible. Cameron Tringali actually is not a terrible play either. So again, looking at these numbers, that's how we can determine like off of our last year buckets. Let's go ahead and just clear and look at our last year twos now. So we can go by stats first if we want. We can look at top 20 stats and see who our top guy is. Let's do this first though. Let's look at salary when it comes to last year twos. So Abram Answer is the top guy for our last year twos. If we were to go back to the bucket system and look at, last year twos, 33.75% finishing inside the top 10. When our highest price guy is 8,700, I think we could attack really any of these golfers and choose them based off of, well, I mean, it's based off their salary, but also based off their bucket. It drops dramatically. So it goes from 8,785. I mean, I guess right to about here, and then it's obviously 7K and below. Really, to me, I am never playing anyone under 6K more than 10% of my player pool, all the lineups I create. I will never play a 6K and under guy more than 10%. It is just foolish. I have so many times had a good lineup fail because I was 40% on a 6K golfer that I thought was a no-brainer. Most of these guys are 6K for a reason. If you, for whatever reason, find the gem, the diamond in the rough, like say a Mark Leishman, $6,800 at the Farmers Insurance Open a few years ago, play him. Maybe go more than 10%. But just word of caution, try to limit your exposure on a 6K golfer. It's not good. You'd be better off going high ownership on anyone in between 7,500 and 8,500. Find two golfers that you like a lot within those ranges or within that range. And that's where you should really pepper, your lineups with. But never more than 10% 6K and below. So a lot of these guys that I see here, I do like, and I will consider them. I mean, this range is pretty large. How many golfers are in it? 40. So it's a 144-man field. 40 golfers are last year twos. Just by volume alone, we could say last year twos, at least one last year two is going to finish inside the top 10. But I'll also say this. I don't think we're going to see more than 3 finish inside the top 10. So when you look at all these golfers, limit yourself to how many last year twos you put in your lineup. So whoever you see here, don't make a lineup with 4 of them. Just don't do it. It's not going to be good for you. Going by the sweet spot number, the top guy is Abraham Answer at 8,700. And again, that's incorporating his price range. So of all the other golfers that are within 8,000, including Joaquin Niemann, he is the top last year too. So he might be worth the play. He might be the guy you want on your lineups. And then it's really Abraham Answer, Joaquin Niemann, Zach Johnson, and then it drops considerably, 54 to 16. And again, this is including everyone within that price range. So it's kind of showing you that, a lot of these guys, their scoring average is probably very similar to each other, as you can see right here, that it's very similar. And that's why they're that number. Abraham Answer has one of the best scoring averages. I don't want to go that way. Martin Trainer, don't play him. Yeah, so Abraham Answer, Joaquin Niemann, and Zach Johnson, your best golfers scoring average. And then rounds, the percentage of rounds under 70. You have Abe Answer, Zach Johnson, and Byung-Hun An. And then Sam Burns. So you could go multiple different ways. Like look at Henrik Norlander. He is a 6K guy. Obviously the number doesn't show up that great, but he's also in competition with all the other 6K golfers. This isn't terrible. His scoring average is below the field average, which is 70.87. And he has a clip of nearly 40% of rounds under 70. So that's pretty good, considering he's over Joaquin Niemann and Cameron Champ and the rest of the guys here. So he might not be a terrible play. Put him in 10% of your lineups. And I should have done that for last year ones. Let me go ahead. If you're watching it all the way to here, let's do that also. So your best scoring average last year one, Harris English, Sung J M, Jason Day. You can see the rest of them up here. Your highest price guy that isn't so far up here would be Sergio. Do we have another guy that's down here? Oh, Will Zalatoris. That's just because we don't have stats for him. But yeah, I mean your top price guy is also your best scoring guy. And then if we go by the percentage of rounds under 70, Harris English is still at the top, just barely over Paul Casey. So you could take that $500 savings and, pivot, or maybe, come down here. But look at Cameron Tringali, 6,900. 69, Matt Kuchar, 76, Swafford, 65, Werenski at 6,400. A lot of good golfers right here, so consider that. Okay, let's go to our last year threes because this is where it's going to be good. Definitely have all of the high hitters, all the big hitters, I should say. So if we go by salary, look at our last year threes, we can see a few more golfers 8K and above, but definitely the only golfers that are 10K and above. And they're last year three, last week ones. And that is a good bucket combination to have. Again, looking at the bucket combinations, 3 ones, looking at top 5%, 8.11%. Now, what would that tell me? I mean, it could tell me a couple things. One is the 3 ones in the past were just not as good as the 3 ones here. And that's a possibility. Very, very good possibility. That, or sure, they may not show up in the top 5 all that often, but if we look at the top 10 and look at 3 ones, a 7 count, 8.75 goes up a little bit. That still wouldn't pay off value, right? If they don't finish top 5, these guys right here, they don't return value. So we have to make a couple convictions. Do we think they're going to? And if we do, how often do we see multiple 3 ones or just multiple last year 3s? I mean, we do see quite a bit of last year 3s, but how many multiple of 3 ones do we see? I mean, in 2020, we only see 1. 2019, we see a few. We see 3. Don't see any in 2018, 2017, 2016 we do. Again, it all depends on who those players are. But, I certainly wouldn't roster any of these guys together. I'm not going to put Bryson with Webb or with Cantlay. Just not going to do it. And in all honesty, I might not even, these guys are too expensive. Pairing any of these guys up together, they're too expensive to put together. And I'm using historical data. So looking at 2019, and again, this isn't a set in stone type of thing. But let's say this 3-1 is right here, and then we have these following 3-1s. Yeah, we have a few top 10 finishes. But if these guys aren't 6K or 7K golfers, the 3-1s that we're going to roster that are that expensive up here, they're not going to pay off. So you wouldn't want to play those 3-1s, regardless if they finish inside the top 10 or not. So that makes it really difficult. Now, my conviction is we're going to see one of these guys inside the top 5. If I'm going to make a bet, I'm going to bet on either one of these 3 golfers inside the top 5. Now, they probably aren't going to be good bets because obviously their odds are, pretty low. But if you had convictions of these guys not finishing inside the top 5, highly recommend looking at any of these guys. I mean, I know a lot of people are Matthew Wolff. I think Matthew Wolff would be a great play. He is in the same group as Bryson, and we'll get to Time Pairings a little later, but I would consider that. Now, how many golfers are in this last year 3? There are 23. So if I were to guess, I'm going to think, well, let's pull up the calculator actually, because I think the same amount of numbers. So how many did we say there were? 23 golfers. So 23 times 0.8, let's just go 875. 20. What does that mean? Hold on. Nope, I did it wrong. It would be 23 times 0.0875. 2. I would say 2 golfers out of this whole bunch will finish inside the top 10. So when you look, and this is primarily why I look at the bucket system. Even if I were to go to 2020 and look at all the last year 3s, sure, we do have, let's see, hold on. We have many more last year 3s than I would have given credit for. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I suppose, looking at all the high price guys here that finished inside the top 10, it is possible we're going to see something similar this year. I really don't have a depiction or any like visuals to show you how many last year 3s over the last couple of years, like who they were. So last year 3 would be a finish of top 10 or top 20. Yeah, so top 20. So I guess if we go back and look at every single year, just quickly, who our last year, guys are. Bryson won. He, 10-8. Chesson, I guess, wasn't really it's somebody. I gotta go by price. We gotta go by price tag. So Ricky Fowler had not played. Tony Finau had a 16, so he would have been a last year 3. Jordan would have been a last year 1. Then we got a couple guys here. Simpson would have been last year 3. Cantlay last year 3. Finished 2nd. Obviously, you would want to play him. Woodland would have been a last year 3. Finished 10th, so he did get 10th, but I don't know if you'd want to play him. And I guess we have a couple of obscure guys. Really, what am I looking at? Oh, we're looking at price. That's right. So yeah, I guess the top price last year 3s are the way to go. If I'm being completely honest, MQ is just Monday qualifier, and I don't know why that is at the top. I'm just gonna. It's annoying. So I guess, yeah, looking at all the guys who finished inside the top 20 that are 10K and above, there's a good amount of them that finished. I shouldn't say a good amount. There's 2. But of all the last year 3s, we did see quite a bit finish inside the top 20 and also inside the top 10. There, we can bring those guys back now. How about 2018? I just want to do this really quick. I mean, how many guys do we see up here that are anybody, really? Really, we have nobodies that were last year 3s. So that also is a huge tell. I mean, we have to consider the golfers in each of these buckets. So maybe we see 3 or 4 last year 3s. And maybe over time, we're going to see that bucket grow a little bit more than these 2. The other thing too is I would take this number 17.5% and consider it in my lineups. If I'm making 10 lineups, yeah, I don't know. Never mind. I'm not gonna. This only works when it's like bulk lineups, like if you're creating 100 lineups or so. Anyways, all right. So those were the last year 3s. I'm closing in on an hour. I knew I was going to. Let's go ahead and look at last year 4s. The bucket is so much smaller. And Russell Henley is by far the best player that you would want to play within this bucket. But if you do have to grab a few other golfers, we can look at the bucket combinations and try to figure out if anything, lines up with what we want to see. And unfortunately, even if we look at top 5s, we see no last year 4s. And if we look at top 10s, the best last year 4 we see is a 4-1. And then we see a bunch of 4s down here. And we can obviously use this as a visual. So in 2018, we had a last year 4 finish 2nd. But we have a 9th, 7th, 8th, and a 3rd. I guess, which is not terrible. So we see a last year 4 inside the top 10 we do see one every single year. We see a last year 4 every single year. That's the other thing with the bucket system, is seeing what your min maxes are. So your min max for last year 4s. So 2017, I should have one, right? Oh, now I have to take it back. 2017 does not have a last year 4 in it. So we don't have a last year 4 every single year. But for the most part, we see at least one. So that's the other thing to look at with this. And then obviously your last year 3s over the last 2 years look to be your best bucket to pick from. So that's also something to look at. Okay, so last year 4 doesn't look good. I wouldn't play someone out of this bucket too highly, honestly. So we can skip a little bit by last year 4. If I'm going to pick one, it's going to be Russell Henley. I don't have an issue with Ryan Palmer. If we look at, scoring average, who has the best, it's going to be Russell Henley. We have what? Actually, we have a considerable amount of last year 4s better than the scoring average for the field. So the field average was 70.87, and we have the majority of them actually better than that scoring average. And anything that's over 35, in my opinion, for rounds under 70% is pretty good. So I would consider that. A lot of good golfers, I suppose, that you could choose from. I will say this though, don't play more than one. That's my warning. Last year 5s, a little bit, what was one more? So there's 14 golfers in this bucket. Obviously, your best one is Colin Morikawa. And Colin Morikawa is from Las Vegas, or he lives in Las Vegas. His number is by far the highest over here. The most top 20 stats in this bucket. And this includes Doc Redman, which is really interesting. So again, if we go back to the notes page where we have the bucket system, how many times do we see a last year 5? So we can look at our min maxes here. Last year 5. It's very sporadic. We have a bunch of zeros and we got a couple ones, a few ones. And then when we look, what's the best finishing place for last year 5? We have a 7th, and that's it. And a 10th. 7th, 7th, and 10th. Is that going to cut it for someone like, if you're going to roster Colin Morikawa? I don't think so. So maybe that gets you on someone like Harold Varner III. He has the second highest sweet spot number. He is the 3rd priced guy in the last year 5s. And each one of these guys, not the greatest course history, not the greatest recent form, surprising enough. When it comes to scoring average, just about half, a little bit over half of them, it is half, exactly half of them have a scoring average better than the field average. And when we look at percentage of rounds under 70, Mark Hubbard actually is your leader in this bucket at $6,500. I know this is a weird thing to say, but maybe if you want to pivot from Colin Morikawa, it's to someone like Mark Hubbard. If you're going by bucket system, it's not a terrible way to look at it. But I'm not going to spend any more time on the 5s. Just wanted to show you because it's interesting. Colin Morikawa, obviously, at the top of that one. And even probably more interestingly enough is Scotty Scheffler at the top of the last year 6s with Jason Kokrak and Keegan Bradley right behind him. Again, going to the notes page, when we look at last year 6s, it looks almost identical to last year 5s. It's just one off. It matches it in almost every single year, meaning it isn't a good bucket to choose from. So I would probably fade this entire bucket. Honestly, I'm going to fade Scotty Scheffler because of what the bucket system shows me. Again, it depends on the golfers inside, the bucket. It also it's almost determined based off of volume as well. I would say seeing something like this hurts Scotty Scheffler more than anything. And it's not that the bucket system itself is hurting him. It's because his recent finish for this year was not great, and his recent finish last year at this tournament was not great. So that's how I look at it when it comes to the bucket system. So with all that being said, the last piece that I'm going to talk about are tee time pairings. So basically how I have this color coded, I did this entirely different this time. Any golfer that had a scoring average under the field average, I highlighted. I should say I filtered out by that number. And then if I had a cluster of 3, I automatically colored them green. If there were only 2, they were yellow. And if there's only 1, it's red. And obviously, if I saw good golfers that were all under that range, under that scoring range, I highlighted them a darker color green. So you're going to see as we go through this, golfers that I think are going to pair well with. And again, it goes by scoring average. That's how I'm looking at it. So let's see here. I want to hide this information because I don't think it really matters. And we can hide these pieces of information because, again, you can look at it from the bucket combination. And now we have everything that I want. I want to see the percentage of rounds under 70. I want to see scoring average, differential, that kind of thing. So when we look at this and we look at a group like this, so all three of them, we're good for scoring average. But then we look at their percentage of rounds under 70. Now, if these golfers get hot, I would like to think that they're going to feed off of each other. And it could be Mark Hubbard with Brian Harman. It could be Matthew Naismith with Mark Hubbard or Brian Harman. It doesn't matter. It could be a combination of the three. All three of them might elevate each other's playing status. So it tells me I like this golfer a little bit more based off of, what group they're in and how good they are. Now, let's say Mark Hubbard was playing with Emiliano Grillo, Sepp Straka, and Graham Dillette. I would say, ooh, man, all of them are over scoring average. I don't know if this is going to help Mark Hubbard out. But on the flip side, Mark Hubbard could lift one of those two golfers up. I don't think they'll lift each other, like all three of them up. And I don't think the other two that have terrible scoring averages are going to do better than Mark Hubbard. Let's put it that way. So that's how I'm looking at this. And I guess I'm not going to really talk about everybody. You can just see what the colors are here and then who the player is. So I actually don't mind the Carlos Ortiz, Chesson Hadley, Wyndham Clark group. I know the scoring averages are a little bit high, but if you look at the differential, the differential is their scoring possibility, their potential. I like that. So I'm not going to really steer clear from this group. I might pair Carlos Ortiz with Wyndham Clark or Chesson Hadley. It's a possibility. And Chesson Hadley, I think, is a Nevada native. No. Okay, never mind. He's just played here. He's played well here in the past. Your dynamite group is this one right here. By far and away. I mean, I'm going to probably start a lot of my lineups like this or like this or even like this. I think having a combination of these guys is going to be good. I think it's a great lineup. But obviously not to really... This group is just as good. Maybe pairing Webb with Joaquin Niemann would be a good choice. Or, which would probably be highly contrarian, would be like a Webb and a Collin lineup. I'm not sure how much I'm going to play of Collin. I might just play him in one lineup. That's it. And I will probably pair him with Webb Simpson, in all honesty. So I think that would be a good way to look at it. You can see Paul Casey, Keegan Bradley, and Hudson Swafford, which, you could say Hudson Swafford, not last week, but obviously won the Cross Punta Cana. You could say he was hot, for some time. And Keegan Bradley last week was hot as well, just sputtered out at the end. So maybe that helps with Paul Casey. And for whatever reason, I don't have scoring average for Hudson Swafford. I have no idea why, but I just don't. We do have the percentage of rounds under 70. Everyone's over 35. I think that's great. Sung Jae is in a lineup with Sung Kang and Scott Piercy. I can't say I really like it, but in all honesty, Scott Piercy and Sung Jae Im have the same ball flight, so it might be good that they're playing together. Now, their differential isn't that great, so I don't see any of these guys going super low. It's not saying it's out of the realm of possibilities. It's just them paired together, I don't think is going to be good. Seems like a decent group. Two old guys who hit draws and a guy who hits a fade. Draws at this golf course are more beneficial than fades are, so maybe pairing Zach with Brent would be good. Dylan Fratelli, Pat Perez, Tyler Duncan. These guys all have scoring averages underneath the field average. Most of them are pretty close to 35, and their differential is really good. So this is a group that could get hot. So it's not a bad consideration. And I bet you anything, no one's telling you to play Fratelli with Tyler Duncan or with Pat Perez or any combination. You're gonna get it here because of the bucket system and really the scoring average and talking about tee time pairing. So that's actually not terrible. Here's another interesting group: Abraham Ancer, Rory Sabatini. Actually, I don't even know. Sabatini has been voted one of the worst golfers to play with. So I don't know if that does anything with Abraham Ancer. Abraham Ancer is pretty charismatic. It might be a reason to avoid Abraham Ancer. Or maybe Abraham Ancer is the type of guy that just doesn't deal with shit. And he's just like, fuck you. I'm going to play this. I'm going to wax your ass and take your money, basically. He could be that type of guy. I don't know anything about Abraham Ancer. I'm not saying don't play him because he's with Sabatini, but I'm also saying be cautious. Harris English, Harold Varner, and Henrik Norlander. This seems like a really good group to target. And if I'm playing any Harris English lineups, I'm probably going to put some Harold Varner and Henrik Norlander together. Seems like a great idea. Henley, he's a golfer who can shoot really low. And I do like Henley. Henley was playing well for a while, with his recent form average. So I think he would be a pretty good consideration. Denny McCarthy, Sam Burns, Brian Gay. Brian Gay withdrew last week, I believe. So I don't know if there's an injury there. He could bring down the entire group. McCarthy and Burns together, I think, wouldn't be terrible. I don't know how I feel about this group in general. It seems like a really boring group to pick from, but with that, actually might be a worthwhile play. Again, you're not going to find a lot of these combinations together. So, if you want a couple 6K guys, Vaughn Taylor and Scott Stallings, pair them up with Cam Davis, or maybe pair these two guys up. And then you have a lot that you can do with your lineups. I think that is actually a viable strategy. I do like Patrick Rogers. He's playing with Charlie Hoffman, which isn't a bad thing at all. But Patrick Rogers has been struggling, and if you put him in a group that doesn't score that well, that could be an issue as well. He is actually at field average. So, and their differential, their low round differential, it's all bad. So maybe don't play him at all. Okay, so the next group, Adam Schenk, Will Gordon. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm also not going to talk about Benny Ann and Kevin Streelman. Benny Ann actually has a really good birdie, or a percentage under 70. So don't discredit Benny Ann, although he's been playing pretty terribly. Bucket system's pretty good. This is kind of in Kevin Na territory last year, which I'm going to take into consideration. Here's your dynamite group, or one of them, for the afternoon. And believe it or not, Kevin Na has a good scoring average. This was from last year, so keep that in mind. And the differential is really good. His low round, 61. So he can get hot. Obviously, he did that here last year, but he can get hot. I wouldn't play Na with Cantlay, but I definitely don't mind playing like Fowler with Na or Fowler with Cantlay. I think those are good considerations. So I definitely think that's a viable strategy. Louis Oosthuizen, Max Homa, and Russell Knox. I don't like this group whatsoever. I do like Louis. I just don't trust him because I'm not sure why he pulled out of the tournament last week, and he's been known to withdraw just in a moment's notice. So keep that in mind as well. This group is a dynamite group. I like this group a lot. It's a ball striking haven. You have Sergio, Day, and Matsuyama. I think pairing any of those guys up together is going to be phenomenal. I don't care about this group. Poston did well last week. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to translate with these two old. I don't even know what to call them. They're just old. Not going to talk about Rensky or Taylor. I don't like this group whatsoever. Martin Trainer is just going to bring them all down. He is the worst scoring golfer in the field. He primarily brings that scoring average higher than what it needs to be. And he's only in these fields because of his Puerto Rico win last year. So Or not last year. What was it? Where did he win? He won Puerto Rico, what, 2 years ago? I don't remember. Something like that. Here's an interesting group. Now, I don't care so much for Danny Lee, but Doc Redman with Harry Higgs. Not terrible. I don't like Doc Redman's bucket at all. Hey, if you're on Tringali, playing him with Tom Hoagie or even John Huh isn't terrible. I can't remember where John Huh popped up at. I don't remember if he had a stat that was like super odd or weird. I don't remember. But either way, not a bad group. Scheffler, Adam Hadwin, and Xinjun Zhang is actually a really interesting lineup. I do like it a lot. Not a lineup, but a pairing. I like that a lot. If Scotty Scheffler does well, I don't mind pairing him with these two. I probably will fade Scotty Scheffler just because. And then down here, I don't know if there's really anything to talk about with some of these guys. Actually, this is a good group. I didn't even realize this was Christopher Ventura. It just shows that his scoring average isn't as good. But his recent form is fantastic. And his lowest round, his differential is pretty good. So why don't we just color this green? I like it. Okay, so with all this being said, a long video, over an hour long, how are we going to create lineups? Well, first and foremost, we have to figure out who we're going to fade. And I'm actually going to probably end up doing the cascading method. So I've been doing that recently. I don't mind doing something like, I think it's 16, because you end up switching out these three, these three, these three, these three, and then these three. So yeah, it's actually 16 lineups with one guy in it. So I'll go 16 there. I will then do 16 web. And in all honesty, I'm not gonna go Cantlay. Instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change Cantlay out in these ones. So when I do pivot, so for Bryson up here, this is what the pivot will look like. For Webb, the pivot will look kind of like this, and then I'll grab actually Colin Morikawa, and this will be my one Colin Morikawa play, because I don't think I'm going to play a lot of Colin Morikawa. So these are basically, I'm choosing Bryson and Webb over Patrick Cantlay, which actually I like a lot because Cantlay hasn't been playing the greatest as of late. And right there, that would be 32 lineups that I've already decided how I'm going to start. So if you're creating 100 lineups or something like that, you just have to do this a few more times. Maybe you start with, say, Harris English instead, and you'll have a more, well-rounded lineup. So there are 16 Harris Englishes. Again, these three will be replaced. These three, these three, these three, and then these three. For whatever reason, I'm forgetting that there's another column over here. So it's more than 16. Oh, you know why I don't include this column over here? Here's the other part of my strategy. This is almost exclusively for under 7K golfers. And again, I don't play any more than 10%. So if I was to filter by condition and go less than 7,000 and select my golfers off of this, I mean, Henrik Norlander is a guy that I like. So I'm going to show you the guys that I'm going to play at least 10 of. I shouldn't even say at least 10 of. Higgs and Duncan are actually up at the top. I don't mind that. I'm really looking at what the low rounds are and the high differentials. So Tom Lewis actually falls in this, and I played a lot of him last week. I'm not going to play a lot of him this week. I don't think really so much course history matters. Yeah, we got a couple guys. Oh, wait. Ooh, course history mattered last year. and pretty much here as well. That's one thing I also like to look at. Okay, so I guess if I'm going to select a cheap guy, we want someone with course history. 65 there. 68, 65. 64. 63. Okay. I guess if I'm going to do this, then I want to look at course history as our sixth. Oh God, Francesco. Francesco says his game isn't exactly where he wants it to be, but he's going to be worth a flyer in my opinion. I think if I'm looking at anyone down here, I'm just really going to be looking at scoring averages to try to find golfers who can shoot, who can go low. Man, I cannot remember who my favorite 6K golfer is. Can we go with overall bent as well? So we're going to see Francesco up there as well. Chappell, I like that. That helps out. Piercy is interesting. He's a 2.6. I don't know how much I care about that. How about we make sure that this number is not 0? So, I mean, we're seeing a lot of Danny Lee, Francesco, Jimmy Walker even. I'm not going to play any Jimmy Walker. But Cameron Tringali also shows up. And I do like Cameron Tringali. So, okay. I'm basically going to go through here and X out some of these guys. I'm not going to do it right now. But then after I'm done with that, I'm basically doing this. This is my strategy. I just do this. And then you can randomize the range. It can flip over. But I don't care who's in this column. What I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to use the cascade method, and I'm also going to pinpoint some of my favorite golfers that are, under 7K. But for the most part, it's not going to be over 10%. And if I'm creating 100 lineups, that means I'm only playing them in 10. I'm only going to play them 10 times. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to basically do the cascade method with what I have left over. On this side, I'll probably play someone that's 85, 78, 74, and then whatever's left. Or maybe I go 9, 7, 7, 6, or, some kind of combination like that. So I'm going to leave the video at that. This is much longer than it needed to be, and a lot of it was because of the explanation of the bucket system. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and thank you for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the review video on Sunday, but I'll also see you in the bucket system video sometime tomorrow or Friday. Okay, see you later. Bye.